काफी चर्चा हो रही है कि प्राइवेटाइजेशन के अलग अलग स्वरूप हैं, प्राइवेट सेक्टर, नॉन स्टेट एक्टर्स के इन्वॉल्वमेंट के बहुत फॉर्म्स हैं। चर्चा हो रही है ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन के जरिए मुनाफा कमा रहे हैं प्रोवाइडर्स। चर्चा हो रही है यूनिवर्सल रेगुलेशन ऑफ प्राइवेट स्कूल्स, जो सिर्फ ये आरएसएस लिंक्ड स्कूल्स का मसला नहीं है, सब तमाम प्रकार के नॉन स्टेट स्कूल्स पे अंकुश लगाने की जरूरत है, चाहे वो अन्य माइनॉरिटीज के हों, चाहे वो एनजीओ के स्कूल हों, there needs to be some form of regulation. There's also a lively discussion that was going on the need for regulate textbooks and its distribution. जो चर्चा जो निकल कर आ रहा है is there needs to be a universal regulation of schools. Therefore, how can we go about what could such a regulatory framework or regulatory process could look like, and what can we do about it? How can we build the work in that direction? और भी काफी मुद्दे हैं जो स्पेसिफिक इश्यूज, स्पेसिफिक मैनिफेस्टेशंस पे चर्चा हुई है चैट बॉक्स में, बट फंडामेंटली do you think that it is time for a universal regulation for private schools, as one of the participants described it? And what can we do about it?
I think so. I think that the need for regulation is there completely, definitely for private schools, but honestly also for government schools. If you look at the monitoring mechanism that the government has for its own schools, it's quite broken. It is supposed to be monitored both by the education departments as well as by the offices of the SSA, and neither of them functions very well. So regulation and monitoring are sort of linked functions in a sense. If you monitor, then that's how you can also regulate what's happening, because monitoring gives you the opportunity to see what is working and what is not, and therefore what needs to be fixed. So I do think that regulation obviously of the private sector is even more important, because it kind of falls outside the purview of the regular monitoring systems. So it needs to be brought in, but the entire infrastructure, the entire architecture for regulation/monitoring needs to be strengthened, and in the case of private schools, it needs to be built from scratch. And obviously that responsibility ideally should lie with some kind of independent autonomous body, so that it doesn't have any kind of bias on any side. There needs to be a regulatory body which is not only constituted by government sources, but it also has independent experts, people from civil society, etc., who will do a kind of neutral, independent monitoring and give their report, and on the basis of which, if the schools are not functioning as per the constitutional values, as per the RTE norms, etc., then no action can accordingly be suggested. So of course, with the RTE, as you know, that NCPCR was given that responsibility, but unfortunately there are lots of structural problems with the constitution of the NCPCR, with the fact that the RTE division within NCPCR kind of falls in between the Ministry of the Women and Child and the MHRD, and therefore its role is never properly established and defined. So I think there needs to be a review of all of these mechanisms and governance structures that exist related to monitoring within the government, and separate and much more detailed conversation is needed about regulation both of government schools as well as, and especially of private schools. One of the problems that we have with regulating private schools is we are also not collecting enough data about them. A lot of them are falling out of the ambit of the regular data collection agencies, and I think that needs to be strengthened. The reality is we just do not have enough information about private schools today, and given the fact that we all know they're increasing rapidly, we first need to get a sense of how many they are, where they are, what sort they are, and then in line with that develop a mechanism for monitoring. So my suggestion, of course, would be that while it has to have a strong presence of the state, it should ideally be a more independent or autonomous body that has people, the parent body membership, teacher association membership, civil society membership, etc., etc., so that it can be more representative and democratic in nature. I'm not entirely in favor of the Ofsted model, which is commonly used, but I think that it is time to have a conversation and start to have a larger public debate and discussion about what sort of regulatory mechanism one can have for education.